Things off. All right, well, welcome everyone. Again, if everyone can turn on their cameras, that would be really awesome. We have some amazing panelists lined up for you tonight, so would love to show them that respect. Well, welcome everyone. My name is Shalva. I am one of the co-presidents of the PPE Undergraduate Advisory Board, along with Andrew Liu. Super excited to be doing this panel tonight. We have four amazing panelists joining us. They'll introduce themselves shortly in just a moment. Just a quick couple of announcements. There'll be designated time for audience Q&A, so definitely have some questions prepared. Anyone who's here tonight also will receive some free PPE swag, so be sure to pick that up tomorrow at Cohen Hall. And I'll send out a link to join the listserv to learn more about any upcoming prospective major events. All right, amazing. So let's get started. We have all the panelists with us. I see Amanda, Cecilia, David, and Jaywon. Awesome. Okay, well, to get started, would love to ask the panelists just, to start at the beginning and each give us a 60-second overview of who you are, what your background is, and what you've been up to since graduating from Penn's PPE department. So I guess we can start with Jaywon. Would love to hear from you.
Sure. Let me know if you can hear me. Good. Thank you. Hi, Shalva. Hi, everyone. This is a great turnout. Thank you for inviting me tonight. It's great to be back. I remember I was actually in Shalva's position moderating last year, so it's amazing to be here. As you can infer from that, I graduated in May from PPE. I am now working as a trader at the D.E. Shaw Group, which is an investment firm based in New York City.
Amazing. David, love to hear from you.
Hi, I'm David. I'm from Philadelphia, went to Penn Undergrad, PPE, obviously. Worked in operations for about 4 years, 2 years out of school for like a leadership development program, 2 years for small startups in New York. Went back to Penn for an MBA, and I'm currently at the Boston Consulting Group, where I've been for about a year.
Awesome. And Cecilia, and then Amanda, we'd love to hear from you as well.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for including me on this. My name is Cecilia Vogel. I graduated from Penn in 2009, so a little while ago now. I worked for 2 years in New York after college at a small law firm here in New York in a role that they had called analyst. I then went on to graduate school and did a joint degree, a master's in international affairs at Fletcher and a law degree at Harvard. I clerked for a judge for 2 years in New York, and for the past 4 years have been a federal prosecutor at the U.S. Attorney's Office in Manhattan. And I'm also originally from New York, so I came back home.
Amazing. And Amanda?
Yeah, sure. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here. So I'm Amanda. I graduated from Penn in 2019, so just 2 years ago. And I double majored in PPE and psychology. And yeah, so the last 2 years I spent doing research at Wharton. So I was a research coordinator for a few different professors. And then now I'm a PhD student at UC Berkeley, and I'm studying marketing. So I'm interested in psychology and studying judgment and decision making. So yeah.
Awesome. Thank you all for that introduction. That was really helpful. So Amanda, I guess we can start with you. What led you to choose PPE?
Yeah, so when I first started, I think I decided to be a PPE major going into my sophomore year. And at the time, I was just trying to keep my options open, I think. So PPE is one of those majors that's interdisciplinary. And so I think at the time I was like, this is probably a safe thing to do. But I think quickly I realized as I was taking the classes, like that a lot of my existing interests were kind of already, like I was interested in psychology. I was interested in like how that relates to politics and policy and things like that. And so I think it just captured a lot of my interests in one major, which was exciting.
Awesome. And David, how about you? What led you to PPE?
Pretty haphazard, to be honest. I was going to go to law school. until just about senior year. And so that seemed like a good fit of content I was generally interested in and work I thought I could do and get a high GPA. And so frankly, I was just there because I sort of looked around at the classes and it ended up being like, oh, I like some econ, I like some philosophy, I like some poli-sci, and oh, they have a major for that. So it seems like a good fit.
Amazing. And Cecilia?
Yeah, so actually, I know there are a lot of PPE majors who do PPE because they're interested in going into law, but actually at the time that I was a PPE major and thinking about it, I was not thinking about law school. I was actually like pretty not interested in law school at all. But I went to PPE also because of its interdisciplinary nature, and I really liked that. And it allowed me to pursue like a bunch of different areas that I found interesting. I was very interested in the time in like international development, and so PPE let me pursue that kind of from an economic perspective, but also for the philosophical issues and sort of the historical and political science side as well. And that eventually led me to thinking about like rule of law, justice, fairness, those kinds of things. And sort of slowly I made my way to law school.
Amazing. And Jaywon, last but not least.
Thanks. For me, I was like dead set PPE from the beginning. I graduated from a high school that actually had a very liberal arts curriculum. We took classes in philosophy in high school for 4 years. And so for me, I was actually ready to continue that. Like I knew I really liked political philosophy, but I wanted some real world application. I didn't want to just do like a double major in those. So I liked that there was the econ aspect of it. And so I ended up writing about PPE and how I enjoyed its interdisciplinary nature, obviously, but just the combination of abstract philosophical principles with application. And quite frankly, I didn't want to do math, so this seemed an easy way out.
Amazing. Well, thank you all for sharing your road to PPE. So I guess, you've done PPE and would love to hear, in what ways has PPE impacted your professional trajectory? And building on that question, were there any specific classes that were particularly helpful for your current career or particularly influential in helping you determine which career path you even wanted to follow? So I guess we could start with Amanda.
Yeah, so yeah, PPE has had a huge impact on my career trajectory, I think. So when I started as a PPE major sophomore year, and the first semester was just taking all these required classes like behavioral economics, social psychology. I think I was taking like a political theory class. And I remember having this moment where I was like, whoa, all of these things are relating to each other. And like, there were like threads between all of them that I was like, whoa, this is exactly the kind of thing I want to study and like want to go to grad school. And I was getting involved in research at the time. So I think behavioral economics was probably like the class that was most impactful because that's now what I'm studying in grad school. And so that kind of set me off on the trajectory I'm on, which is great. But it was only because I was taking that required class as part of PPE that led me here.
And how about you, David?
Behavioral econ was a good class. I do remember that. I would say like probably the most impactful for me was actually like just econ 101 or micro 101 as being like one of my favorite classes. So I could have given this answer if I'd majored in econ too, but that was sort of like my first exposure to any sort of like business application. And I appreciated the fact that there was like a theoretical aspect, but it was also like the applicability to the real world was like sort of clear, at least theoretically. And so I would say that was like my favorite PPE class.
Amazing. Cecilia, how about you? How did PPE impact your professional trajectory?
So I think as I'd started to mention, sort of doing various PPE classes, particularly like political philosophy, was learning more and thinking more about issues related to rule of law and like why in some societies it works and others it doesn't, and what makes it work, and about justice, what is justice, and those kinds of questions. And so it started me thinking sort of more in the legal space. So I really came to law actually from that sort of big like theoretical perspective initially, and that was through taking PPE classes.
Amazing. And Jaywon?
Yeah, so I think my work is not every day like super related to the things and classes that I took as a PPE major. I mean, like subject wise, I think game theory was one of my like favorite classes, hands down. And quite clearly, like as I trade, as I figure out who my counterparties are in the markets, as I try to understand what my relationships with brokers are, those principles definitely still apply. But, you know, the classes that I remember the most, I think, are definitely the political philosophy ones. And I think those have definitely helped me in being like precise with my argumentation. Communication, verbally and written, is a huge part of my job. And so I don't think I could have gotten those without my PPE classes.
That definitely makes sense. And, you know, building on how PPE impacted your professional trajectories, can you share a little bit about, you know, your favorite aspect of the major, or, you know, something that was most valuable that you found and gained, after, you know, as a PPE major? I guess we could start with David on this one.
So in terms of things I found most valuable, one was being able to go abroad and have, because of my globalization concentration, having all of those classes count for credit. That was huge. And
where did you go abroad to?
Budapest.
Oh, amazing. Wow.
Which was cool. And I guess I would echo Jaywon in terms of the actual like practice you get writing arguments succinctly. As soon as you leave here, you'll recognize that that is a skill that most people do not have. And actually being able to write sort of like reasonably logically consistent paragraphs quickly is huge time saver.
Definitely. How about Cecilia?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of sort of what I took away, kind of skills wise, and that I use, like definitely the writing and sort of the logical thinking and being able to like break down arguments and present them in a succinct way has been like very valuable throughout all the jobs that I've held, and was a skill that I really first developed at Penn.
And Jaywon?
Yeah, quite honestly, just like getting my foot into the door with some of these interviews, like it would not have happened if I weren't a PPE major. It's not a major that exists at other colleges quite often. So I think companies were really interested to hear, like, why are you a PPE major? Like, what does that even mean? So that definitely helped. I think the other aspect, including the communication, which I think Cecilia and David have covered like really awesomely, is that it gives you the ability to find parallels across subject matter that you wouldn't have expected. And being able to find those connections really quickly, which I think is what we mean by when we say we're interdisciplinary, is something that's very helpful. It just like makes you a really sharp person, I think, and helps you with this like intellectual flexibility, and helps you describe things to other people better, helps you understand things much better yourself. So yeah.
Definitely, we're very lucky as PPE majors to have that talking point for job interviews. And how about you, Amanda? Would love to hear your perspective.
Yeah. So I was going to say the interdisciplinary. I know I've mentioned that a couple of times, but I think that was the most valuable thing for me. So just having the opportunity to take these classes in like philosophy, logic, political theory, like things that if I was going to choose one major, I would not have chosen those fields. But yeah, having the opportunity to like make those connections between what I was mostly interested in, which was like decision-making psychology, with all of these other fields, I think that was the most valuable thing for me.
Awesome. Thank you all for sharing. So you're all you've all been through college, and we'd love to learn kind of how life after college has met your expectations. And along these lines, you know, was there ever an instance that in which your PPE training at Penn directly applied your career in a way that you didn't think it would? And if so, you can share that situation. If you haven't had that situation, that's totally fine too. But just would love to hear kind of how life after college has looked in you know, compared to your expectations. So we can start with Amanda.
Yeah, that's a good question, because so within a year after I graduated, COVID happened. So that's like the thing that comes to mind where it's like life after college. A lot of it has been during COVID, but that's not related to PPE. But yeah, so life after college. Yeah, so I think, wait, the second part of the question was, has anything unexpected happened, right? But what was the first part was just.
Yeah, so kind of like, did you have expectations for life after college, or, you know, in terms of your professional or academic trajectory, and or, was there ever an instance in which, you really gained something from PPE that applied to that really has been, you found something really helpful from your PPE major that you didn't expect would be so helpful? Just a bonus question that we got from some attendees tonight, so figured I'd add that in.
Yeah, one thing that stands out is as I've gone to academic conferences, I've actually met a lot of people who went to Penn and were PPE majors, and then they're now in my field. So that's been really unexpected because I just didn't meet a lot of people during the PPE major that were planning on going into academia or like doing the things that I was doing. And so that's been a really pleasant surprise, like making those connections with people. That's the main thing that comes to mind in terms of like surprising, unexpected things. But
that's definitely not a bad surprise. How about you, Jaywon?
Life in New York, it's great. It's great. I really love it. It's very different from college. I mean, the Penn to New York pipeline is just astonishing, right? But I've definitely had fun like branching out and meeting people from other universities who have PPE in their own colleges, and it's fun to always like compare experiences. So I think a benefit of PPE is that it allows us to be so open, right? But at the same time, I think figuring out what your requirements are going to be, like choosing the best class that you want to take to fulfill each one, I think that forced me to be a little more proactive about things and organized if I was going to take everything to fulfill different requirements in the way that I wanted. So maybe unexpectedly, like that has helped me in being organized from everything from like my apartment search to how I organize my notes and my things to do at work. So I thought I'd just touch on something like a little less academic, but yeah, that's definitely helped.
Definitely, thank you. How about you, Cecilia?
Yeah, so it's funny to think about things I like unexpected from life after college, because college for me actually now feels like a really long time ago since I graduated in 2009. I think I'd just say, I actually, as I mentioned, like really was not expecting or planning to go into law. And so, I started to have the idea a little bit through PPE, but when I graduated, it was actually the financial crisis. It was very hard to find a job. And I managed to get a job with a small startup litigation firm in New York at the time. And because it was a small firm, like got a lot of responsibility very early on, which was like an amazing way to grow, and worked closely with a lot of lawyers and actually realized I liked a lot of things about legal practice, particularly in criminal law. So I think it's kind of a surprise, honestly, that I'm a lawyer. Is the first thing. It's not what I was planning on or had an interest in. And I guess the other piece that I would say is just having been out of school for a while, there are really some like incredible opportunities, like career opportunities to get a lot of responsibility and have meaningful impact like very early on in your career if you look for them and sort of push yourself to pursue those positions, which is very rewarding. That sort of as a young person with relatively little experience, you can find opportunities to have like very meaningful work in your career.
Thank you. And David, we'd love to hear from you as well.
I guess what I would say to that is that life becomes much less structured. Like it maintains its structure on a daily basis because you have a job that you spend a lot of time doing. Frankly, probably more time than you spend doing schoolwork for a lot of these jobs. But on a longer time horizon, there's no longer that sort of like path from K through college. And so you actually start having to make decisions that matter, frankly. And I guess like my sort of takeaway from being 6 years out at this point and like thinking about my path and looking around is just like being open to serendipity, which is to say that the point is not that you know what you want to do in 6 years, but if you have an idea of like what interests you or the direction that you want to head in, I would focus more on being directionally correct than like stressing over like, is this exactly the right move? And like towards that end, I would also really encourage people to just reach out to people. I remember when I decided not to go to law school, like I reached out to just some like effectively random people who were really helpful and happy to talk to me. And that's something that like when I'm thinking of like, what do I want to be doing in 2 years, like still do. And I've been really surprised that actually like a lot of people don't do that, and people are generally happy to talk. So like I would encourage people, like if you're interested in the field, like just randomly reach out to people, and some of them will respond.
This is true. This is how we got panelists for tonight.
It's true.
Well, on that note, David, what advice, and Jaywon touched on this a little bit, what advice do you have for people? You know, we have all sorts of students on this call, definitely a lot of freshmen as well. What advice do you have for people just starting in the PPE major regarding class exploration, extracurriculars, or anything else, you know, that's part of the college experience, especially in the context of PPE? Like, did you do anything that you really, in a way that you appreciated, or was there anything you wish you did differently? What would you say to your younger self?
I would say definitely go abroad. That was a worthwhile experience and one you'll remember. Like in the time, it's like, oh, I'm going to miss a semester with my friends. But like in the aggregate, you're better off having 7/8 of possible semesters with your friends and also a semester of doing something new. And then in terms of classes, like, you know, take things that interest you, and then it's just easier to do well. Like if you're not interested in what you're trying to learn, then one, like a couple years after your first job, like unless you're going to grad school, no one's going to care what your GPA was anyway. So might as well spend your time like actually developing your interest than like trying to just pad your GPA. Definitely.
I assume that Penn abroad applications will soar after this Zoom call. How about Jaywon? What advice would you have?
First piece of advice, join the PPE UAB. But seriously, like it was a really great way for me to understand not just the classes that I was taking, but also understand the administrative strength and like energy it takes to maintain a department of this size. I guess not a department, just a major of this size, right? And that helped me try to connect to my professors more, because I just understood how hard it was to sometimes get them to agree to teach PPE classes. So I think that would be my first piece of advice. Second is, I think it becomes very easy to slip into a mindset in college where you're focused on like the first job you're going to get post-grad. And, you know, that comes with this share of stress over internships, recruiting season. Like I was literally just there, like I remember it. But I wish that I had taken some more time to not just take classes that I knew I could do well in, but classes that I think would actually challenge me. And that I spent considerable time investing into. Like I took certain classes because I was like, yes, this will pad my GPA. Like I'm confident I can do well with as little time input into it as possible. And I think that's because I was running around doing clubs, I was running around recruiting, whatever. But the chance to study in undergrad kind of only comes around once. And I wish that sometimes I had dedicated more time to things like my thesis, like things like building relationships with professors by taking higher level seminar classes earlier, by taking some of these capstone PPE classes earlier. So definitely just don't be afraid to invest more into your academic journey, is what I would say. But at the same time, like, don't be too overwhelmed. I know those are contradictory, but try not to be too overwhelmed. It's just all about like process of elimination. Like, I think, like David said, the direction matters more than the exact right step at every point.
Definitely. How about you, Cecilia?
I think this reiterates a lot of what's been said, but just take the classes that you want, that you think are interesting. Like, don't really think about your GPA or like what's going to look good, because actually now that I'm fairly far out from college, it's an incredible luxury to be able to study, like have all of this at your fingertips and just study whatever you find interesting. Like, you never really have an opportunity to do that again in your life. So, you know, that's the one thing I would say is, like, I think most people are at Penn because they like learning, and just take the time to take classes that you like, even if they're just because you find it interesting. You'll have plenty of time to like really focus later in your career and in your studies. The second thing that I'd say is just when looking at internships and picking internships, really try to observe when you're there, like what the people who work there full-time, what are they doing day to day? And do you find it interesting? Both as subject matter, but also tasks, like how they're spending their time. because that's the best way for you to start to think about for a job, like, or for a career, like what you might enjoy. And I really draw a distinction between like subject matter and tasks, because I think you need to find something where you're happy with both of those things, what you're spending your time doing and the subject matter. They don't always go hand in hand. And that's something that I've seen a lot for people who go into law. Sometimes they find they don't actually like it once they become a lawyer, because they haven't thought like about how you're actually spending your time day to day, as opposed to just like the subject matter of certain legal issues. So it's good to just start thinking about that early and observing.
Definitely. And Amanda?
Yeah, I think I have two main pieces of like class extracurricular advice. So first, I think one of the privileges of being at Penn is there are just so many amazing professors. And I think this is something I didn't realize fully until like junior, senior year. And as Jaywon was talking about, there's so many like seminars, capstones where you can get like actually form closer relationships with professors. And I ended up taking a lot of those junior and senior year, but I think taking as many classes where you with professors who are either like well-known or like highly rated on Penn course review, I forget what that thing is called. But the professors that you hear are really good, like really try to take those classes with them. There's certain classes like only juniors and seniors can take that you have to apply for. And so like try to take those because those are super, super valuable. I think I took one with, I took one with Katie Milkman, Angela Duckworth, which was like the most rewarding thing ever. It was like a senior junior seminar. But those kinds of classes are just incredible. And yeah, that's like a very Penn specific privilege. And then I think relatedly outside of class, I don't know if jobs count as like extracurriculars, but I got involved in research assistant jobs pretty early. And I think that's a really great way to one, kind of explore like your interests and whether you kind of like potential career trajectories if you're interested in research, but also like making money on the side while doing work that's not super, super demanding, but you're also learning at the same time. So I think I would recommend like anyone do some kind of research assistant job just to get a feel for it and yeah, make money, meet professors, form closer relationships with them. So
awesome. Yeah, I have to echo what Amanda said about Katie and Angela's class. Everyone should definitely take it. Science of Behavior Change, best class ever. So moving on a little bit to careers, you know, there are some freshmen and sophomores on this call, but there are also some juniors and seniors who are figuring out what they want to do when they grow up. And so we'd love to kind of hear what led you to your current career and what advice you might have for students who are trying to navigate what they want to do after graduation. You know, how do you find out what the correct career to pursue for you is? You know, how do you know if you want to pursue a career versus grad school? So hopefully we can hear your perspective on that. Jaywon, do you have any advice on this end?
Sure. I don't know if this is going to be like scary or comforting, but long story short is that I still don't know. I think a lot of people are still figuring out. Just because you get a job, just because you start a job post-graduation does not mean it's the role that you're going to be staying in for the rest of your life. I think it's very far from that. I think just because you think you land what you think is your dream job after graduation does not mean that you stay at that job forever or that, you know, reality is in line with what you expect. So for me, you know, as a traditional humanities kid, also thought I would be going to law school, started Penn with every intention of doing so. I did a research internship with PERM my freshman year, quickly realized like it just wasn't for me. Like it was just so solitary sometimes. And I didn't have like the self-discipline to keep myself going. I got very burnt out. So I, you know, started looking into what other trajectories might be. And one path that opened up for me through a program actually for the summer was investing roles. So I interned for a summer in the endowment at Penn, and then I eventually moved on to my current company. So that's the path that I've taken so far. But like law school is still not entirely out of the question for me. Like it's definitely something that I want to think about with more perspective and with more clarity that I think working will give me. And quite frankly, like as Cecilia was talking about before, I don't know if being a lawyer exactly is what I want to do, even if I think I would enjoy law school. So I guess to recap, like the advice that I would have for students to try to navigate that process is that don't stress too much about your first job. It is not going to be your last job. There are always more pathways you can take after. B has been touched upon. Reach out, because I think what is helpful is talking to other people with similar backgrounds, even dissimilar backgrounds sometimes, to try to get their advice on if they were in the same position as you, what path they ended up going down. So for that reason, I think this panel is a really great start. And I'll just leave it at that. If I think of any more, I'll come back.
Thank you, Jaywon. Cecilia, what about you?
I guess I don't want to recover what everyone's already said. I think I would encourage people to take time to work between college and like potential graduate school. I do think that that's typically very valuable. Having a job is very different than being in school. And so like you learn a lot from like your first job out of college in terms of what you might be interested in. And also just about working with other people and being at a job every day and like meeting deadlines and being in a professional environment like all the time. Those are like amazing skills for you to get quickly that then I think when you do go to graduate school, whatever it is, will really serve you well, and like you'll be sort of more prepared for whatever it is that you want to do out of graduate school.
And how about you, Amanda?
Yeah, I wanted to echo what Jaywon said about your first job not being like the end all be all, because I think at Penn, what I observed around me as an undergrad was people like that was kind of like everyone's end goal was like the job you get right after college, which it feels like that during college, but just 2 years out, like looking around at my friends, it's so clear like people are switching careers, like they're pivoting or they took a little bit to find a job. And so I think putting less stress on yourself to find like the perfect or most impressive first job is probably good advice. I also think in terms of grad school thing, this might kind of contradict what Cecilia said. This is just another perspective, but on the grad school thing. So some of my friends in undergrad, so I was kind of like set on the PhD thing. Like I was like, I'm doing a research job. I'm going straight to, not straight, but research PhD, like kind of a linear thing. And I knew people in undergrad who, like some of my friends would say like, oh yeah, I might come back and do a PhD later. And they kind of like wanted to keep their options open. And I remember like thinking, I don't know if that's the best route. And now just like being in a PhD, I'm like, I'm very glad that I didn't go off the path that I knew I wanted to take just to have a job that might have looked more impressive, like right out of college. So I think if you do have a firm idea of like long-term, I'd like to do X, then probably it's a good idea to like go in that direction. I don't know. I know there's like probably different ways to get to that end goal for a lot of people, but I would probably advise like if you have a good idea of what you want to do, then probably do the thing that will lead to that, rather than thinking like maybe I'll come back to that thing in 10 years, because a lot of times I think that doesn't happen. But that's just another perspective from like this is probably advice I would have given my college self.
Awesome. And David?
I'd say two things. One that everyone has touched on is like, well, to turn it into a little bit more of a process, I would say like, this is not an existential question, or it doesn't have to be. Like, I would start by just thinking about like, what are things that I like to do and or think about. I would then go to career services with an idea of the things that I like to do and or think about it. And they'll help you sort of identify like, here are careers that may or may not fit. And then 3, I would reach out to people in those careers and talk to them. And then I would iterate on that cycle. I think that is a probably fairly concise way of getting there. And I would also highlight my second point is that getting there isn't really a destination, since no one really knows what they want to do. And very few people are going to be in the job that they start after college in 3 years. So as long as you're kind of heading in the right direction, like, I would consider that to be a success.
Yeah, if I can follow up really quickly, like I mentioned this before, like it was just the process of elimination for me. Like the internships and the clubs that I joined, like these were all opportunities for me to decide not only what I do like about each of these things, it's what I don't like. I realized that I didn't like working alone. I wanted to be with other people. I realized that I wanted deadlines. I was not good at sticking to those that I set for myself. So in doing so, I think that helped me get a little closer to something that I think would be a more fulfilling or a more fulfilling job for me to start.
Awesome. And we have an awesome question from Jack, which I will get to in just a moment. And people are super free to ask questions in the chat or to turn on your cameras and mics and ask them. I have the last pre-written question, and then the floor is open to all of you for Q&A. But a question that we got a lot in the registration form for tonight's panel is directed a little bit more towards Jaywon and David. And that is, for those of you in more business-oriented roles, how did you break into more technical fields, given that the PPE curriculum is a pretty qualitative one? So if you have any kind of perspective on that, and we'd love to hear it. We can start with David.
Yeah, I would just firstly think about it. The fact is, PPE is highly analytical, not necessarily in the way that's commonly understood and that you're not taking math classes, but that doesn't mean that you're not actually very good at breaking down problems, which to me is what being analytical actually means. And so I think that's definitely, like, I remember like applying to jobs out of school and like that kind of being a challenge. But I would highlight that one, like after you're sort of like that initial job, your major is sort of less of a big deal. And two, I think you can highlight sort of ways in which you have analytical experience in your sort of like interview and or through like other outreach to a company. So that's sort of my only advice there.
Awesome. And Jaywon?
Yeah, this is a question I ask myself pretty regularly because I think my company is known for being pretty quantitatively focused. My manager has a PhD in particle physics. Like my team has a lot of people from like the hard sciences. And so that is a question I ask myself a lot. And I think it's exactly what David said. In some ways, PPE and the analytical skills that it's given me is actually a boost. It's a strength for me. And that's something that I highlighted in my interviews as well, because it doesn't matter how well you can like code or, do math sometimes if you can't explain your thinking and explain your process in a way that helps people to understand your thinking and to understand how, smart and capable you are. So those like verbal and written communication skills have continued to come in handy for me in my interviews and my job currently as well. And then, yes, it's a technical field. Don't get me wrong. Like I'm never going to be able to fulfill some of the jobs that like coders do because I wasn't trained in it. But, think about it the opposite way. Like they still have need for people in every single type of process. And I'm more than happy to talk to someone who has an interest in those kinds of areas where you think the company is more quantitatively focused or maybe more technical, but you still want to figure out how to leverage your PPE background. And then the other part, I've mentioned this before, is that being interdisciplinary and switching from political philosophy in one day to going to game theory in your like next class to talking about marketing in your next, like that requires you to pivot from different topics. And as you're studying, I'm sure you're going to use that to draw on different lenses and different angles in a way that makes you more like interesting and well-rounded person, but also that like speeds up your processing, I think, and analytical skills as well. So that's just something else to highlight.
And one other thing to add there, now that I've actually thought back more to this time, particularly when I was an undergrad, or like when you're writing your resume, you can also just choose what elements of your sort of profile of professional experience you want to highlight. And two, you can sort of seek out experiences that are going to be more quantitative. So I actually did research for a summer for a professor, but like was seeking out research that was sort of involved me sort of using R. Like as an experience that I thought would speak to the fact that like, while I wasn't majoring in something traditionally analytical, I actually did have the ability to learn analytical tools.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the PPE program like gives you so much flexibility to do that. Like this kind of touches on Jack's question as well, but like research, using some type of like coding that a lot of political science professors use, you know, forcing yourself to like take some of those classes. Like I think social stat is one, or like just statistics in general. Like these are all useful things that you can do within PPE if you do feel like you want to take a more technical route.
Awesome. Yeah. And would love to hear if anybody else has any perspective on Jack's question in terms of getting involved with, you know, research assistant type positions.
Yeah, so I was just about to respond in the chat, but so there's some organized ways to get involved in research, like organized programs. I think Jaywon mentioned you did PERM, so there's like undergraduate research programs. I didn't do any of those. I think I applied and like got rejected from PERM, so didn't do that. But there's also some classes where you can like basically be a research assistant but get credit for it. And Wharton has some in that. I think you don't have to be a Wharton student to do that. But they're like, I think they're like 299 classes or something like that. So those could be options. And then other than that, I think for just finding like general research assistant positions that you get paid for, I think there are a lot of just like online applications. So positions are open, and I think sometimes they're sent through listservs. But another way, I think just emailing professors would be that worked a lot of times for me. Like, I mean, there's probably tons of professors I emailed that never responded because they're really busy. But yeah, I think a lot of times professors have uses for research assistants, but they're not actively recruiting them, but they'll like find a way to pay you or find work for you to do if you seem really interested in the topic. So I think if you have any professors in your classes who you're like, oh, I really, really like this class and I'd like to do research with them, just, yeah, reaching out to them. I think like a couple people have said, like always asking for things is the best thing you can do, because a lot of people are not asking for what they want. So I think emailing and asking people for advice is always helpful. And then a final thing is getting in touch with professors might be hard, but PhD students or TAs that you have, like a lot of times they might be a better way to find opportunities for research assistants, because they're the ones doing the research actively. So they might be helpful if you have any like contacts with PhD students, or if you can email them. So yeah, basically just asking people for advice and asking people to like pass you on to other people, I think would be a good strategy.
Definitely. And David, thank you for sharing your thoughts in the chat as well. Well, would love to open up the floor to all of you for any questions that you might have. Feel free to raise your Zoom hand, and we can definitely hear from you that way. If you prefer, you can also type it in the chat, and I can ask the question, whichever is most comfortable. So we have our first brave volunteer, Michael. We'd love to hear your question.
Hi, I would like to just thank you all so much for sharing your experiences tonight. This has been very helpful. I loved how you touched on some of the skills you thought the PPE education really brought you, such as the communication and the ability to think across disciplines. But I was wondering, what were some of the skills that you use like every day that you found weren't really touched upon in your PPE education? And how would you go about recommending us ways to supplement those, and so we have them when we need them?
I'm happy to quickly start with this. And I would actually say that from a broader skill perspective, nearly none, because I think just being a generally smart person who can break down problems is really the fundamental skill that all of these jobs want. And two, I would say when it comes to technical tools, technical like Excel or PowerPoint that are used in a lot of sort of businessy type jobs, big proponent of simply learning when you're on the job. I mean, they're designed to take people who don't know how to use them and then turn them into very proficient users quickly. So I wouldn't stress about the like technical aspect of tools to prepare for jobs.
Awesome. And any other panelists are welcome to jump in if you have any perspective on this.
I think this is more on the communication front, and so there probably are opportunities in classes to do this, but I don't think I really did. Not a big part of my job, but some of my job is public speaking. Like I go to court all the time. It's not always for a trial, but it's for different things. You argue things in front of the judge, in front of the jury. So I do think public speaking is an important skill. And obviously that's something you use not just as like a lawyer in court. I mean, you use it in any job, right? Like doing a presentation. Something perhaps more unique to my field, which really I think you just learn on the job. I don't know what in school I would have done to develop this, and I'm still learning. There's actually interviewing people. I work, with witnesses a lot and like preparing witnesses to testify and things like that and to investigate. And it's a real skill to be able to talk to people who come from like really different walks of life and try to get them to tell you stuff when often they don't want to be sitting in front of you at all is definitely a skill. That's probably something that's like more specific to my career path and something that I don't think I really developed at PPE. Not sure what I would advise in order to develop that at school, but I think possibly through different extracurriculars. And I think part of that is just maybe getting involved in activities at school where you are like working in communities that are like different from your own. Just like dealing with people that are different than yourself. Trying to make a connection with people that way is a good way to build that skill.
Sure. I think for me, like a key part of my job is just being very detail oriented because I work with, real-time data, real-time markets. The, acceptability of an error I make is very low and it also becomes very expensive sometimes. So in order to mitigate that, like I just have to be really extremely careful about everything that I do. And that means being proactive rather than reactive, just double checking every single detail. And that's something that I think PPE like set me down a very good course for, just because the nature of argumentation and philosophy, and even in econ and political science, is that you have to make sure you can follow like one step logically to the next. But I wish that I had actually read the readings for my classes. I think you'll find this, but sometimes you can get away with just like not reading. Like you can just show up to class if you're a fast reader like me, like you can just skim through and contribute to the discussion and like be done for the day. But I would encourage you to just participate in the act of, preparing for class more and just reading through text more carefully, because I think that definitely gives you just like a better skill set that you'll use in terms of like time management, but also being detail oriented and being very thorough.
Yeah, I want to echo the detail oriented thing. I think one thing about college is that often when you're doing tasks and like writing papers and things, you just get it good enough and then you submit it. And then in the real world, like you have to get things to a higher level of quality. Like you might do something and then you're like improving it and then you keep improving it and you keep improving it. So I think like developing that mindset a little earlier would be helpful. I don't know if that's a skill, but it's something to keep in mind. And then I want to echo the public speaking thing. So like in any job, you're going to have to give probably most jobs you're going to give presentations. So cultivating that skill earlier, I kind of wish I had done. And then the only other thing skill wise is data analysis. I don't think I had tons of experience with after undergrad. And so I took like a couple stats classes that used R, and I think those were really helpful. I think those were just electives that I took. So that's a skill I think is valuable in a lot of jobs. So taking extra classes in that could be helpful, but again, that you won't need that in every career. So that's just kind of dependent on what you want to do.
Awesome. Any other questions from students here tonight? We'd love to hear them. Again, feel free to raise your Zoom hand or type them in the chat. Any brave volunteers?
I'm trying to like raise my hand, but it's not working.
Oh, go for it, Jack.
No, you're good. I was like trying to press the button. It was like, nah, I don't even know where it is. It's fine. So I was just wondering, a lot of many critiques that people have with PPE is that it's too diluted in the concentrations that you focus on in the letters itself. So P, P, and E. And I, especially when it comes to econ, because I feel like you only have to take like 3 econ classes. Um, I guess there's a caveat to that because it depends on what you concentrate. But I was wondering, do any of you like feel like that inhibited like your success in your careers, that it was a little more diluted, or do you feel like that actually advantaged you because then you were more interdisciplinarily skilled and more like I don't know uh I don't know, more you had a broader skill set in general?
Yeah, I mean, I would caveat that by saying, and I know this is like not your perspective, like you're just like asking about it, but like who expects an undergrad to be an expert in political science, even if you've majored in political science? I don't think it's right to assume that undergrads, I mean, like maybe with the exception of certain like really exceptional ones, like to assume that undergrads are going to be like subject experts in anything. Like the point of undergrad is to explore, I think, and to gain skills that'll take you beyond, and of course to like set foundations for maybe things that you want to explore in further study in a PhD and a master's, like whatever later on. For me, because I'm not in an academic role, like I think PPE has been nothing but beneficial. And while I did get accusations of like minoring in 3 different things, like I think that's totally fine. It was much more interesting for me, and employers were much more interested in me as well. So yeah, maybe others will have like a different take.
I agree with everything. And I think if you major in 3 minors, like whatever, you're really, in the vast majority of jobs, even when you're out of school, are not really going to be applying content knowledge from those econ plus 3 classes.
Yeah, like, I mean, I think if you're trying to go to a specific type of grad school, like you're very interested in a certain type of PhD, like it makes sense that you should in undergrad, like develop that interest by taking as many classes as you can that are supporting your application. Maybe you develop relationships with professors who can speak to that interest. But I think for the vast majority of people, it just makes sense to take advantage of that time to just explore what you're most interested in and develop relationships with like classmates and professors. I think that's another thing that actually was important to me that I didn't mention before. Like I needed recommendations for different jobs. I need references, and my relationships with professors, which I developed by really enjoying their class and trying to participate in it a lot, and then going after them after the class had ended or the semester had ended to ask if I could work with them further in a research role. That definitely came in handy.
I think just to reiterate, I think it was David that said this earlier, like really after you're a year or 2 out of school, except for probably some exceptions depending on your field, like nobody's really looking at your college grades or like even that focused on what you majored in. I think at that point it becomes more about like the skills that you develop and whatever it is you're doing after college, and kind of how you spin those skills as to whatever you want to do next. So I think I didn't find it to be like a disadvantage. I think most employers like don't really expect you, like right out of school, expect you to really know how to do that much of anything. I think they recognize that you're right out of college.
Awesome. Any other panelists want to add to this or? Cool. Any other audience questions? Again, feel free to unmute yourself and ask or type in the chat. All right. Well, it looks like we've exhausted our list of questions, and just want to take this opportunity to thank each of the panelists so much for joining us. You have very busy lives and are doing incredible things, so thank you for giving us this hour of your evening. And just a quick public service announcement. Gonna send a quick link in the chat just to if you're interested in learning more about future PPE opportunities. You can sign up to join the listserv here. Again, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you, panelists, and looking forward to seeing you all again soon.
Thank you for having us. Bye.
Bye all.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks so much for having us. Bye, everyone.
Thank you so much. Super helpful.
Thank you.